Okay, we'd like to turn to the book of Matthew, begin chapter 14 and then in chapter 15. Matthew 14, we'll read verses 13 through verse 21. When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And when the people heard thereof, that is, that Jesus had gone into this desert place, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the village and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They need not depart. Give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, Bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. And then over in the book of Matthew, chapter 15, verse 32 through verse 38. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him, and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness, as to fill so great a multitude? And Jesus said unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 basketfuls. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. So what we have here is 2 separate miracles of Christ, both involving the feeding of a great multitude of people. In Matthew 14, there is the account of Christ feeding, verse 21, 5,000 men besides women and children. So it is a multitude well over 5,000 people. 5,000 men, and then you add women and children. We could be talking 15,000, 20,000 people. But it's well over 5,000. In Matthew 15, there is the account of Christ feeding in verse 38, 4,000 men, besides women and children. So it's a multitude of well over 4,000. The only 2 miracles recorded by all 4 gospel writers is the resurrection of Christ and the feeding of well over 5,000 people. It's the only 2 miracles recorded by all 4. The miracle of the feeding of well over 4,000 was recorded by Matthew and it was recorded by Mark. So only Matthew and Mark record both of these miraculous feedings. What we read here, again, are two separate events. They are very similar events, yet they are different in many ways. In these two miracles, both in their similarities and in their differences, there are an abundance of lessons for the child of God, and there are applicable principles that are revealed to us that will, if we apply them, will help us throughout our life. In both events, we see the apostles. They're in an overwhelming and impossible situation. And Jesus makes the difference. And that's our subject, Jesus, the difference in overwhelming and impossible situations. You look at all the miracles of Christ. Most of the miracles recorded are healing miracles. There are also miracles over nature, which is what we have here. But all the miracles of Christ portray the various needs of man. They portray the sufficiency of Christ to meet those needs. They are recorded to authenticate the person of Jesus Christ, to authenticate the mission of Jesus Christ, and they are there to promote and strengthen our faith in Christ. So in these two miracles, the outcome is the same in both. The outcome is they did all eat and were filled. That's the outcome of both miracles. They did all eat and were filled. So let's look first of all at the setting of both of these miracles. I want to see them side by side. And then we'll look at the Lord's provision in the miracles, how He provided. First of all, consider the place of both miracles. The feeding of well over 5,000. Luke 9 and verse 10 says, it was a desert belonging to the city of Bethsaida. This would be on the northeastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And it was predominantly a Jewish area. In the feeding of the well over 4,000, it is referred to in Matthew's account, in Matthew 15:33, as the wilderness. And in Mark's account, though he does not tell where the miraculous feeding took place, he does say, in reference to the miracle, in chapter 8, verse 1, in those days. And that refers back to Mark chapter 7, verse 31. Jesus was passing through the midst of the coast of Decapolis. So it was in a wilderness in the area of Decapolis. Decapolis was on the southwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. So you have the southeastern shore, the southwestern shore. And it was predominantly a Gentile region. So looking at the two miracles together, we see Jesus miraculously providing for Jew and Gentile. For Jew and Gentile. Christ is the answer for all people. We also see the background of both miracles. In the feeding of over 5,000, we know that John the Baptist had been beheaded. And after the apostles buried John the Baptist, they went and they told Jesus. So they, with broken hearts, went and told Jesus. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while. Luke records that he took them and went aside privately into a desert place. And there the apostles would be refreshed. They would be comforted by Christ. And the Lord is preparing them, as He always does, for what's coming next. They don't know what's coming next, but the Lord does. It's recorded in Matthew 14:13, Mark 6:33, that the people of the region, Jewish people, saw Jesus and the apostles departing, and they came unto them. Over 5,000 people had gathered. Jesus looks upon this multitude of men, women, and children with much compassion, and it says that He healed many of them and taught them. So there are miraculous healings going on. And there is the teaching of Christ. Now the apostles, they of course witnessed these healings. I mean, they saw them take place, which should have prepared them for what was coming next. As we preached last week, they didn't carry over. They didn't carry over what they saw in the healing with the need of the people. In the feeding of over 4,000, Jesus had just healed the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman, which the apostles had witnessed. And now they had left Tyre and Sidon, and they go into a mountain in that region, Matthew 15:29. And a multitude gathered unto them, and they gathered with their sick. And again, Jesus healed them. Notice Matthew 15, verse 30 and 31. And great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. Insomuch that the multitude wondered when they saw the dumb to speak, the maimed be whole, the lame to walk, the blind to see, and they glorified the God of Israel. Again, the apostles witnessed these miracles. And then this went on for 3 days. This went on for 3 days. This healing. So there were multiple healings. And Jesus then looked upon the people. Many of them he had healed. Many are there that had brought the people that needed healing. And he looked upon them with compassion because they had nothing to eat. So, proceeding both miracles, the apostles had witnessed with their own eyes Christ doing the miraculous repeatedly in healing these individuals. In both miracles, there arose a need. The feeding of over 5,000, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all record that it was getting past mealtime. And it was evening was setting in. And the people were hungry. And they had nothing to satisfy their need. In the feeding of over 4,000, Jesus said of the multitude, they, that is the healed and those who brought them to be healed, continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And in Mark's account, Mark 8:3, many of them had come a great distance. Because Jesus said, if I send them away, fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for divers of them came from afar. We also see in both miracles, the place was not conducive to the need that had arisen. In the feeding of over 5,000, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all say, in reference to the people's need to eat, we're in a desert place. In other words, where we are is not conducive to this people's needs. We're in a desert place. In the feeding of over 4,000, both Matthew and Mark refer to the fact that they were in a wilderness. Again, this is not a conducive place to meet the need of this people. Also, in both miracles, there was a lack of material means. In both miracles, Christ caused the apostles to know and to feel the insufficiency, the meagerness, and the inadequacy of their means. He caused them to know this. He caused them to feel this. We do not have what it takes to meet the needs of this people. We do not have what it takes to meet the need that has arisen. We've all been there. In the feeding of over 5,000, Jesus gave the command, give ye them to eat. Feed them. That is an impossible task. They could not do that. They do not have the means to do that. They do not have the ability to do that. The place is not conducive for such. But Jesus said, give them to eat. Now in John's account, in John 6 verse 5, Jesus asked Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And both the command, give ye them to eat, and the question to Philip was to bring them to realize the insufficiency of their means. We do not have enough to feed this people. Cause them to realize the inadequacy in and of themselves. We need to often be brought to that place to realize we don't have the means and we are inadequate in and of ourselves. That's a good place to live, by the way. Most people don't want to live there, but that's a good place to live. Matthew records, Matthew 14:17, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Mark records, Mark 6:37, this is the feeding of over 5,000. Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread? A penny was a day's wages. Shall we go and buy 200 days' wages of bread? That would be 55% of a yearly income to even begin to feed this people. Luke records in Luke 9:13, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for the people. And John records in John 6 verse 7 that Philip had already done calculations, and there's always one in the group that is going to calculate. Not saying that's wrong, but don't limit yourself to calculations. John 6 verse 7, 200 pennyworth of bread, this is Philip, is not sufficient. 55% of a yearly income is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take but a little. He said, even if we spend 200 pennyworth of bread, each person is only going to be able to take a little. It's not going to make any difference. They're still going to be hungry. And Andrew said in John 6 verse 9, there's a lad here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? They realized that what they had was not sufficient to meet the need or to meet the task at hand. In the feeding of over 4,000, though the apostles had been in a similar situation before, they're overwhelmed at the need at hand. Notice in Matthew 15:33, and the disciples say unto him, whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness to fill a great multitude? Somebody should have spoken up and said, hey, do you remember what just happened? When Jesus fed over 5,000, we've got less people here now than we had then. Let's just depend on Him. But that's not who we are. That's not what we do. We don't carry over the blessings of God. And notice they emphasize the difficulty of the place. They mention in the wilderness, there in Matthew 15:33. They mention the insufficiency of their means. Whence should we have so much bread? Why would we bring so much bread into the wilderness? And they also emphasize the number of people to fill so great a multitude. So what is their focus upon? Their focus is upon the place. Their focus is upon the insufficiency of their means, and their focus is upon the task before them in this great multitude. No one said, here's Jesus, He can take care of it. Because that's not who we are. Instead, we focus upon all these other things. And again, they had just experienced the feeding of well over 5,000. They knew full well we do not have what it takes to meet the task at hand. And in both miracles, they calculated. And again, nothing wrong with making a calculation, but they made a major mistake in their calculating. They left Christ out. They left the Lord out. That's inaccurate calculating. They had just witnessed the mute speak, the deformed made whole, the crippled walk, and the blind see, and it was all because of Jesus. And now here they are in a place of need, and they leave Him out of their calculations. We're no different. We do the same thing. The apostles proposed a solution. We're good at that. They proposed a solution to the problem at hand. Keep in mind who they proposed the solution to. The Lord, Christ. In the feeding of over 5,000, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record that when they realized the problem that they had, they suggested to Christ that He send the multitude away so they could buy for themselves food. That's their solution. Send them away. Very easy solution. Notice, well, the same is suggested in the feeding of over 4,000. In Matthew 15:32, if you look at that, it says, I have compassion on the multitude because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat, and I will not send them away. So it's suggested that once again, they had made this suggestion. In the minds of the apostles, send them away was the only solution. And oh, how prone we are to limit ourselves to the solutions of man. There is Christ right in their midst. And they limit the solution to man. We ought to live in the glorious possibilities of what the Lord can do. We don't very often, but that's where we ought to live. So now let's look at Christ's miraculous provision. Especially in the feeding of the over 5,000, I want to notice the providence of God. We are told of a boy in that multitude. Well over 5,000 people. And there is a lad here. We do not know his name. We do not know who his parents were. We do not know his intent for being there. But he, by the providence of God, was the right person in the right place. And how many times in our lives God has put the right person in the right place. The Lord does not need anybody. But on this particular day, he had this boy that he was going to use that day. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record that they had 5 loaves and 2 fishes. John gives a little more detail concerning what they had, telling us that Andrew came to Christ and said, "There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes." We have 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Well, Andrew took notice that the fact that they were barley loaves. And he took notice that these fishes were small. 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. Now, in that boy's mind, why he came there with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, we do not know. But we do know this. Proverbs 16:9, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps." We know why he's there. We don't know why he's there in his mind, but we know why he's there in the Lord's working. He's there to be used. Perhaps the boy came hoping to sell his loaves and his fishes. I tend to think that the reason he's there with 5 loaves and 2 fishes is the Lord said to him, "Pack a lunch. Pack a lunch." The Lord just told him, "Take that bread, take those fishes, and go." Also in the providence of God, you have over 5,000 people and you have a boy. The Lord calls Andrew to notice him. That's the working of God. Not only did Andrew notice the boy, he noticed what he was carrying. And he noticed exactly what he had. 5 loaves and 2 small fishes. Also concerning the providence of God, the Lord led this lad to be willing to hand over what he had. They went to him and said, we want what you have. He handed it over. So you see, God is working. Christ knew what he would do, and he had everything in place, and he was directing all matters. And Andrew, when he first saw that boy, probably thought very little of it. He's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But all what the Lord was going to do. And you may take notice of your surroundings and you may not think much of it, but the Lord knows what he's going to do. And he knows what he's going to use. Then notice the paltry means in the hand of Christ. in the feeding of over 5,000, after Jesus said, "They need not depart, give ye them to eat," it was at that time that we read John 6, verses 8 and 9, when Andrew said, so Jesus has said, "They need not depart, give them to eat." And Andrew speaks up, "There's a lad here with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes." And then he said, "But what are they among so many?" And that is when Jesus said, Matthew 14:18, "Bring them," that is, the 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, "to me." Bring it to me. And oh, how we need to learn that when in difficult, demanding, and impossible times, rather than just accept how we perceive things to be, bring what you have to Jesus. You might say, "Well, I don't have anything." Bring it to Him. Bring your nothing to Him. But that's the answer. The solution is not send them away. The solution is bring it to me. Bring it to me. And I believe that's always the solution. So Jesus says, "Bring it to me." And they did. And we're told in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's account that Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He took them in His own hands and he prayed. And then He gave the loaves and the fish to the apostles to distribute amongst the multitude. In the feeding of over 4,000, we're told in Matthew 15:36 and Mark 8:6 that Jesus took the 7 loaves and a few little fishes into His own hands, and He prayed, and then He gave the loaves and the fish to the apostles to distribute amongst the multitude. So in both miracles, we see paltry means, insufficient means in the hands of the apostles, transferred to the hands of Christ, who then presented them back to the apostles, who transferred them into the hands of the hungry multitude. In the feeding of over 5,000, in the lad's hands, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Nothing more. Nothing more. That's it. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. In the apostles' hands, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Nothing more. 5 loaves, 2 fishes. An insufficient, inadequate amount to meet the need at hand. In Christ's hands, it was 5 loaves and 2 fishes also. But in His hands, it was more than enough to feed over 5,000 people. Big difference. In Christ's hands, it's still 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But He can do a lot more with it than you can. In the feeding of over 4,000, you have 7 loaves and a few little fishes in the apostles' hand and nothing more. In the apostles' hands, 7 loaves, a few little fishes. In their hands, an insufficiency to meet the need. In Christ's hands, 7 loaves and a few little fishes, more than enough to feed over 4,000 people. So in both miracles, the emphasis is not what they had. The emphasis is not the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The emphasis is not the 7 loaves and a few little fishes. But the emphasis is they were transferred to the hand of Christ. That would make all the difference. We need to hear, we need to obey always the words of Christ. Bring them to me. Bring them to me. When you find yourself in a difficult and demanding place, a place of seeming impossibility, a place greatly lacking in means, hear Jesus say, bring them to me. Bring whatever you have to the one who can. That's always good advice. Well, I've got this bill that's $100 and all I have is $5. Bring the $5 to the Lord. In your hand, it's always going to be $5. And in your hand, it's not enough to meet a $100 bill. But you put that same $5 in Christ's hand, and all the possibilities that now exist. Paltry, insufficient, inadequate in our hands, but in His hands, miraculous possibilities. All that we would learn. All that we would learn. In our hands, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but in His hands. In our hands, 7 loaves and a few small fishes, but in His hands. Unlimited potential. So may we learn not to focus upon the difficult place or the overwhelming need or our insufficient means to meet that need, that we do not put God in a box and stifle our lives. And that's what the apostles first did. And Jesus said, give ye them to eat. And the apostles reacted by focusing upon the fact that the place was not conducive, the multitude was too large, and the means were too small. We can't. The first response to Christ was, we can't do that. Well, if Christ commanded you to do it, you can do it. He'll give you the means. We have here, now listen to the apostles in these 2 miracles. Matthew 14:17, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Where was He putting the emphasis? On the little they had. We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Mark 6:35, they said to Christ, this is a desert place. They're focusing on their place. And Luke 9:13, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They are emphasizing, Lord, this is all we have. And in John 6 verse 7, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. And Andrew said, there's a lad here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they amongst so many? And in the feeding of over 4,000, we hear them in Matthew 15:33. Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness to fill so great a multitude? The answer to it all, bring them to me. That's the answer. Bring them to me. Well, it's still 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Yes, it is, but it's in different hands. Makes a big difference. Makes a big difference. So let's consider the Lord's amazing way of providing here. Both of these miracles are beyond the ways and calculations of man. I've been in many a business meeting, finances come up. And there's always a calculator. Someone's going to pull out that calculator. Well, we can't do that because we only have so much. We can't do it. It's not possible. They leave God out of their calculations. Now, we're not saying it's wrong to count what you have and what you need. Don't get stuck there. That's what I'm saying. Don't get stuck there. So, viewing these two miracles side by side, we see that when there was less visible means, 5 loaves and 2 fishes compared to 7 loaves and a few fishes, there was most to be done. Feeding over 5,000 is more than feeding over 4,000. And the larger the task, the less visible means they had. That's amazing to me. We don't think that way. We don't think that way. We don't calculate that way. 5 loaves and 2 fishes is not as much as 7 loaves and a few fishes. And feeding more than 5,000 is a greater task than feeding over 4,000. But most was done when there was least to do it with. Only God can do that. In both miracles, there was a surplus. That is, there were leftovers. There was enough for all. They did all eat and were filled. There was enough for all, but then there was more. Jesus would later place some significance on these leftovers. Notice in Mark chapter 8, verses 18 through 21. Having eyes, see ye not, and having ears, hear ye not, and do ye not remember? Christ is saying to them, haven't you learned anything? Haven't you learned anything? I can hear the Lord saying that to us many, many times. Haven't you learned a thing? And then notice what he said. When I break the 5 loaves among 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments took ye up? And they still remembered. They said 12. And when the 7 among 4,000, how many basketfuls of fragments took ye up? And they said 7. And he said unto them, how is it that you do not understand? How is it that you do not get this? I can. I can. You can't. I can. It's not difficult. Why don't you get this? Jesus is saying. There was most left when there was least to begin with. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, more than 7 loaves and a few fishes. But there was most left when there was least to begin with. When there was most eaten, there was most left. I believe we can safely assume that over 5,000 people are going to eat more than over 4,000 people. And there was, when most was eaten, there was most left. You do all the calculations you want. You can't do that. And most was done, again, when there was least to do it with. So these 2 miracles are really a living illustration of Ephesians 3:20. Unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. And these 2 miracles illustrate he is able. He is able to make it more than enough. He's able. We need to know that. We need to believe that. We need to practice that. In both miracles, their ability to eat was exhausted. They did all eat and were filled. But Christ's power to feed wasn't exhausted. And so it is with you and I. These two miracles illustrate the sufficiency and the ability of Christ to more than provide for the needs of man. They teach us that there is no need beyond His sufficiency, beyond His ability. They illustrate the fact that whatever our resources, He can do more with them than we can. That's always so. That's always so. These two miracles illustrate that material means are not the determining factor in what can be done. The determining factor is the Lord, not our means. Not our means. Again, nothing wrong with knowing what your means are. We ought to. That's responsibility. But don't let your insufficient means put you in a box. Don't leave Christ out. These two miracles serve as a reminder that in all our calculations, don't leave out the Lord. Don't leave out the Lord. That's a major miscalculation. We need to lay hold of what we see here, and we need to incorporate what we see here into our lives. We need to lay hold of what is taught in these miracles. We need to incorporate into our lives what is taught in these miracles. And what is taught is the sufficiency of the Lord to meet all our needs, regardless of place, regardless of time, regardless of the insufficiency of our means, and regardless of the task at hand. He is able. He is able. So it just makes good sense. Bring it to me. Bring it to me. And see what He can do with it. He'll show you what He can do with it. If you bring what you have to Him, He will show you. And you know what we do? We're amazed when it happens. Next day, same event could happen, and there we are again. Oh, we don't have enough. We don't have enough. We forgot all about. Just in a matter of minutes, we can do that. God help us. Brother Ben, if you come and lead us verse song.